Hello, and thank you for joining us back here at Classic Vinyl Podcast. This is a podcast where we listen to and review songs and albums from the classic vinyl era of the 60s and the 70s. I'm one of your hosts, Justin. I'm here with my other host, Tyler.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to say allegedly because there's no question about that.
No, there is none, actually. You'll come running back, right?
You got our money back.
Something like that.
Something like that. I don't know the words.
Well, if you've seen the title of this episode, of course, we're going to do the Rolling Stones today, and Time Is On My Side. This is kind of an important song of, obviously, the Rolling Stones' career, and played a pretty big part in the British invasion as well. But let me give you a little history on the Rolling Stones before we get started on the song. Of course, they're an English rock band formed in London, England in 1962. This band has been active for over 6 decades now.
Yeah, they've been around longer than, like, British Parliament.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but they're made up originally of Mick Jagger on vocals, Brian Jones, multiple instruments, mainly guitar, Keith Richards on guitar, Bill Wyman on bass, and Charlie Watts on drums. They're very well known for their blues and rock and roll style. Brian Jones was replaced by Mick Taylor in 1969, right before Brian Jones' death, right before he joined that famous 27 Club. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, they were actually childhood friends. Decca, that's the label that rejected the Beatles. They actually are the record label that signed the Stones. So they had one mishap, but I think they did pretty well with the Stones.
Yeah, if you're gonna like pass up on the Beatles, at least they're not that stupid. they picked up the Stones.
Yeah, I think there isn't a better band to get than the Stones, obviously. But the first single the band released was a cover, which all the English bands at the time were doing covers, but it was a Chuck Berry song called Come On. It reached number 21 in the UK charts. Their second single, I Want to Be Your Man, speaking of the Beatles, is actually a Lennon and McCartney composition. It reached number 13 in the UK. It's All Over Now, which we have an episode where we did that song. It was their first number one in the UK. It was a cover of a Bobby and Shirley Womack song. Now, the second album, which this song is actually off of, it was called The Rolling Stones No. 2. That was their first number one record in the UK, and it hit number 5 in the US. And the first Jagger and Richards single written by the duo to reach number one was a song called The Last Time. So the summer of 1965 is really when this band hit it big. Obviously, their huge hit, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, first worldwide hit, number one everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Their top hit of all time. I mean, big hit, really pushed this band into superstardom. So a lot of their 60s big hit songs like 19th Nervous Breakdown, Mother's Little Helper, Paint It Black, big songs. Jumpin' Jack Flash, Sympathy for the Devil, Street Fighting Man, Honky Tonk Man, Gimme Shelter, You Can't Always Get What You Want. Those are kind of later 60s hits. Brown Sugar, Wild Horses, Beast of Burden, Shattered, big hits in the 70s. They have hits in the 80s, even some in the 90s, and still going on. Their most recent album is pretty strong, in my opinion. Post-1970s album, they started getting in that tongue and lip logo that they're really well known for, and all the young kids wear them on their shirts now and probably don't even know what it's from.
I always thought that was like the Twizzler lips, but then I come to find out, no, it's the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, Twizzlers stole it from them.
They did.
So Mick Taylor quit the group in 1974 and was replaced by Ronnie Wood. Ronnie Wood most famously had been in the Byrds and the Jeff Beck Group and Faces. They've had many comeback tours. They're still touring to this day. I mean, huge artist.
And these guys are in their 80s.
I know. And Mick Jagger, I mean, I have heard that he actually hauls a trailer full of exercise equipment around with him to every show.
Oh, wow.
A full trailer full. I mean, he still moves better than anybody ever seen. He's in great shape, and he's still got huge lips.
Wow. His signature.
So just a few years ago, Charlie Watts, the drummer, died in August of 2021 at 80 years old, unfortunately. All in all, they've released 30 studio albums, 23 live albums, 12 compilation albums, and over 350 total songs. They're the fourth best-selling group of all time. They've sold over 240 million albums worldwide. So I would say they've had a little bit of success.
They won't have to worry about their kids putting them in a home.
No, I think they'll be fine.
I think they're too old for a home anyway.
So do you want to get to the song review?
Let's do it.
And now it's time for the song review.
Okay, so today we're going to do the Rolling Stones and their hit song, Time Is On My Side. Tyler, before we get going on this, what is your history with this song? I know we listened to the two Rolling Stones versions. We listened to the original instrumental version, and we also listened to the version by Irma Thomas. But what is your history with the Rolling Stones in this version.
I'd heard one of those versions before, and it's always the second recording that gets played on the radio.
Yeah.
A lot of radio play. So I'm pretty familiar with the song in and of itself, but the other versions and the original version, that was a first for me. I really like the other versions, but I guess we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, so this song was originally written by songwriter and producer Jerry Ragavoy, and it was actually under a pseudonym at the time of Norman Mead. So the lyrics were most likely written by Jimmy Norman of the Coasters, but that has been up for debate, but we're going to stick with that story for now. Ragavoy also wrote songs for other artists. Janis Joplin, most famously, he wrote Piece of My Heart, Try Just a Little Bit Harder, Cry Baby, and many others and some other songs. He worked with Elvis a little bit and stuff like that. So he's been pretty popular. The original recording was by Kai Winding and his orchestra in October of 1963. Now, this is an instrumental song, and we listened to that tonight, and it's kind of interesting because you can tell what song it is. I mean,
the song, just without the lyrics.
yeah, it's not bad. And then we also listened to the Irma Thomas version in June of 64 that was released, and it's not bad either. It's kind of got more of a Motown sound to it.
Yeah, but boy, she's got a pretty voice, and she owns this song, and it adds a life to it or a different perspective when you have a woman singing it about a man than a man singing it about a woman. Not that one's neither here nor there, but it gave another dimension to the song that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. And so like I said earlier, there are two versions the Rolling Stones released of this. And the first version, the easiest way to tell, I think 99.9% of the time, if you're hearing it on the radio, you're going to hear the second version. It's more polished, has a guitar intro. The original version that they recorded kind of starts with an organ. It's almost like a churchy style organ.
Yeah, Mrs. Baumgartner's at the organ, and here we are going to church.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the original version that starts with the organ was recorded at Regent Sound Studios in London and produced by Andrew Oldham. And it features the Rolling Stones as they are with Ian Stewart on keyboard, and he's on keyboard on both versions. But that was the first U.S. version that started with the organ. It was released on September 25th, 1964, and it had a B-side in the U.S. of a song called Congratulations. And it was on their U.S. album, which they've kind of got that same deal that the Beatles had going, where they had different U.S. albums and different U.K. albums for a time, but it was on their U.S. album 12 by 5. Now, the single reached number 6 on the U.S. charts, giving the band their first top 10 hit in the States. It also reached number 3 in Canada. They did record a second version, and funny thing is that version they released on their Rolling Stones number 2 UK album. The first version that they released in the US, they recorded in London. Now, this version that they released on their UK album, they recorded at Chess Studios in Chicago. And that's the version you're probably going to hear anywhere. You've kind of got to go digging for the original version. This is the more polished version. It sounds much cleaner. It starts with the guitar intro instead of the organ. It's just a much better version, in my opinion, by a long shot.
Yeah, for sure. The lyrics are mixed closer to the front so that you can really hear what they're saying.
Yeah, if you go pick up any Rolling Stones greatest hits album, compilation album, or listen to them on Spotify or Apple or whatever, you're going to hear that second version that's more polished, definitely.
Without Mrs. Baumgartner at the intro.
Exactly. So this song had a huge impact, like I stated earlier, on the British invasion. This was part of the Stones, coming to the U.S. They actually played this song on their first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show in October of 64. So this plays a huge part in that. It falls in with all those Beatles and Kinks songs and all that first wave that was coming over with the British invasion. This song's been covered by a ton of other artists: Blondie, Wilson Pickett, Paul Revere and the Raiders, and a ton. I seen a whole list of them, and I didn't want to list them all, but a ton of people. And this song really, the lyrics, they're about losing your girl, but it's a matter of time before she returns. And I mean, after all, it's real love, and it's the kind that you need. She's going to come back, right? Mm-hmm. She'll come running back.
Oh, she will.
So after listening to these versions of the songs, more specifically the second Stones recorded version that we all know and love, What are your thoughts on this song?
This song, for a British invasion song, is surprisingly mellow. It's got this real smooth, kind of almost like a ship rolling on the waves of the ocean. This is just sweet.
I think that's how a lot of the early Stone songs really were. They were more kind of bluesy, slow, but they did have that guitar that added to them, you know, that kind of spoke a little of that rough edge you were going to hear on some of the stuff a little later on.
Yeah, for sure. So it doesn't come across as nearly as heavy as a lot of the British invasion songs, but even so, there is plenty of power behind the singing and the guitar and a lot of the instruments. While this is just a nice slow dance song, listening to it like you could imagine on the Ed Sullivan Show after everybody's been, dancing and going crazy, this is just a nice little swaying song to just dance slowly to. And it's a real nice song. I like the message of it. One of the pieces of my personal history with this song is in my younger years when I was single and kind of having some frustration with dating. A good friend of mine, my oldest sister's husband, so my brother-in-law, I was talking with him and he was asking how things were going. I was like, I'm just having no game. I'm having no luck whatsoever. And he's like, he put his arm around my shoulder and said, time is on your side. And, just that one lyric from this song, and I got to listening to this song. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, all I got to do is I got to make sure that I'm the kind of person who's putting that kind of love out there that makes it, the kind of love that people need. So they will come running back. That's when it started to click. A couple of years later, I met my wife.
That's absolutely beautiful.
It was a beautiful story, a little personal anecdote from my history. And, so this song, it's got a special place in my heart. It's a sweet one. It's not necessarily a song that in all the times listening to it over and over again on the radio has really been something that has been endeared to me just in and of itself. It's just been really endeared to me and probably gets bumped up in my rating by a couple of points by my personal history with the lyrics of this song and my brother-in-law.
He wasn't referring to the lyrics, was he?
No, just quoted it to me.
Just a quote.
In fact, it wasn't a direct quote. He said, time is on your side. That's pretty cool. Anyway, I really dig this song. What do you think about this one, Justin?
One thing I forgot to say about this song is it has been featured in a ton of movies, television shows, commercials, things like that.
Oh, for sure.
It's in a couple series that I really enjoyed, 6 Feet Under and The Sopranos.
Mm-hmm.
It was featured in both of those and a ton of commercials. So, and generally the Rolling Stones version, because there are those other versions out there, but the Rolling Stones are really what made this popular. I don't really care for the early version, even though the same song, it's just not polished right, and the organ gives it a weird feel. Mm-hmm. I do like the jangly guitar in the first version a little bit, but you get that in the second. Plus, you get the guitar intro with it, and it's got a nice, kind of a slow, subdued guitar solo in the middle of it. But I like it. It's really nice. It's a bluesy song. I think the thing that lends it not only the guitar over their first version, but just how well it's mixed. It just sounds 100 times better.
Oh, for sure. I didn't mention anything about the instruments really, but something that I really noticed in this song and appreciate about it is that steady tambourine. It's not like your typical, rattling the tambourine, making it, sing throughout the whole thing. No, this thing is just a steady beat that it holds and keeps that time so perfectly. And that stood out to me. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that before I was done recording with you, because otherwise I would never forgive myself.
No, so I think you're right, though. It's a very good song. I really like the early Stones songs. I pretty much like all the Stones songs up until the mid-'70s. Even their new album, Hackney Diamonds, is really strong, in my opinion, and Jagger has got a really good vocal on it, and I think anyone that hasn't checked it out should, because it's strong.
I'll have to check that out because I haven't heard Mick Jagger's voice recently. As some singers age, particularly I'd say Paul McCartney, listening to him sing the Beatles song that was just released last year, Now and Then, you can hear how his voice has altered from his younger years. But Mick Jagger, I'd be interested to see what he sounds like now.
It's definitely different, but he's aged it well, I think, too. I mean, for being well into his 80s, he's doing a good job. But
absolutely.
Let's get to the song rating.
Let's rate it.
Song rating.
Okay, if this is your first episode, then we want to welcome you by saying our rating system is pretty straightforward, 0 to 10, 10 being the best. And I'm going to give this one a pretty solid 9. And that's high, right? So like I said earlier, in the review, part of that is probably bumped up a couple notches by my history with this song with my brother-in-law, my good friend. But there's other little tidbits about this that really rank it up there. This song isn't your quintessential, like, heavy, hard-hitting rock like the Beatles' British Invasion that sparked it off, you know? This is a mellow one, and this is something that still fits in with the British Invasion. This isn't a heavy, hard, hitting rock and roll song that you really jam out to. This is just a nice reprieve, but it fits so perfectly into that era as well.
I think that's what makes both the Beatles and the Stones so special, though, is because when the Beatles come on, Ed Sullivan, as did the Stones, they both had hard rockers and this. They showed both sides to what they could do, and I think that was pretty important.
Yeah, and so that different facet to it just makes me fall in love with this song all the more. And so I think that's why I rate it so high. In and of itself, it's probably not as good as I'm giving it, but it's just between its background that I have with it and listening to it in the context of the other contemporary songs of the time, and also with the other versions that are out there. I strongly recommend that our listeners go out and find the other versions, specifically the version that was sung by Irma Thomas. That one, I just really liked hearing a woman's voice singing it and comparing them, the two. So that's why I put it up there. Where do you put this one, Justin?
Well, I'm certainly not as high on this one as you are. I really enjoy the song. I like the early Stones. I like the Stones all the way around, but I rate this one a 7. It's a good song. I visit it quite often, and I enjoyed it. And I suggest, as you do, that our listeners go out and check out the other versions, including you can find the version on Spotify that was originally recorded in London.
In September of 64, not November.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. You can tell it's it when you start off and it plays the organ. So I give this one a 7.
Yeah, that's probably where this song is. But I'm interested in hearing the modern Mick Jagger, because I'm convinced that the guy has probably got a demon or at least some sort of pact with the devil. If there's any artist out there that sold their soul for rock and roll, I figure it's probably him. So
it certainly could be.
Yeah. But I mean, then again, it could just be the guy really takes good care of himself. And
I think that's probably the biggest thing. But so that's the Rolling Stones, and time is on my side. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email at classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com. And if you have any song suggestions for us to review, we'd certainly like to hear them as well. We really appreciate you listening. Until next time, we'll see you later.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.